Taneytown Planning Commission, please come to order. I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. Would you please stand to the pledge of the flag? George, would you lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let the records reflect the members that are present here this evening. The commission members should also receive the draft minutes for October the 29th, 2018. Is there any corrections or additions to those minutes?
No, sir. I move to approve as presented.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise? Carried. Thank you. First item on the agenda for tonight, action items, Knox City Creamery Service Concept Site Plan Development at 8 Mill Avenue. Jim, would you start us off on?
Sure. We heard a presentation similar to this several months ago for a crematory. The initial plan was to renovate the existing brick building at 8 Mill Avenue. After doing some investigation in there to that, the developer determined it just made more sense to demolish the building and replace it with new construction. So that's the plan that's up on the board before you. The surveyor, Joel Bringle of Bringle Land Surveying, is here this evening to fill you in on the project. As I guess I noted in my report, currently the site is almost completely impervious, so we're probably looking at no stormwater management, very few county agencies that are going to have to comment on it. So it should be a pretty straightforward site plan. And I'll turn it over to Joel to kind of fill you guys in.
Okay, please go ahead.
My first rodeo, gentlemen.
All right, we'll lasso you if you get out of.
What's that?
If you get out of line, we'll lasso you.
Okay. Okay. Well, do you have any questions right off the bat? I mean, he's pretty much the scope of the plan is already what he's detailed. The couple years ago, when Durborough Properties bought it, there were some additional buildings on the property as well, attached to that brick building that's there now. He's removed them in preparation for this. Other than that, his plan, the building plan itself would basically be a garage with a nice front porch on one side. You have your plans in front of you. Let me, just can't see that board very well.
Do you have any renderings of what the building is, or the garage is actually going to look like? Is it going to be like brick or aluminum siding or vinyl or?
It's supposed to have siding on it. It should look like a residential home.
We should see a picture of
If on the plan, you see the side where the handicap parking is?
Yes.
Okay, that is a section where the family members can come into a small viewing room. Okay, so that section will look like the front of a house. And then around the side of the building there where you see it says garage door, where opposite the 3 parking spaces,
Yes.
that will essentially be a garage door. Purpose is to bring remains in preparation for the cremation.
Jim, is this property going to be part of the Old Town District?
That is going to be part of downtown business.
Yeah.
It is part of the Old Town District that's subject to the design standards. As you may recall, the standards are not terribly stringent with regard to materials, and they really look to properties in the immediate vicinity for design cues and scale and things of that nature. This site is unusual in that it's got a variety of building types and styles and sizes, all very close to it. So it's there's no one particular architectural style that it's going to need to follow. There are, modest residential dwellings on Mill Avenue. There's, of course, the old feed mill is there, which is a pretty huge building scale-wise, but I don't know that we want to invoke architectural style from that for a building of this nature. But it's quite a hodgepodge of styles and sizes in that area.
And this is a one-story building. Roof line is going to be that similar to a rancher, is the slope of the roof.
Slope roof, okay.
Do you have a picture of the building?
I do not.
Aren't you gonna have one?
I don't know if I'll have one.
He's
Will-
the surveyor.
I'm the land surveyor. I apologize.
Okay.
And again, at this point, we're just looking at the concept, not preliminary or final, just the basic idea, basic ingress, egress, where the building's going to sit on the property, things like that. So the rest will come with the
Preliminary.
next stage.
I did meet with the gentleman who's doing the architectural drawings because he had some information on where the stacks for the cremator and all those things were to be located that I needed to show for an MDE permit. And at that time, what I was looking at with his elevation views looked very much like a residential home.
So how high will the stack be, or will it be typical to a chimney on a residential?
It's basically like a chimney on a residential.
Yeah, and I guess the only other thing that we might have concern with really is the alley.
The alley,
The alley that comes in off of Mill Avenue.
yes.
So how wide is that, and do you have, I guess, is there a deed to that, or is that, are we talking about, is that a private alley, is that a town alley?
It's not a city alley, and I believe it is depicted on the concept plan there behind the property with the existing funeral home, between that property and the crematory site.
The deed specifies running beside an alley. And the deed for the Durbro properties that fronts on Main Street go back to an alley. So that's why we have an alley shown. The entire area is paved now.
Yes. But does the deed then also show where it connects to Mill Avenue?
Yes.
But there's no deed for the alley.
I have not found an in-fee deed for the alley.
Okay, so in
That's
terms
correct.
of right-of-way issues.
In terms of right-of-way, nobody that adjoins it owns it
Right,
because they,
nor does Durborough. It's,
correct, that's correct.
Okay.
sounds like we have a lot of those in the city.
This-
Grand Supply bought the two houses up here that I own to make the alley wider years ago. And that was never taken off my deed, but it is an alley.
Does anyone have any?
Yeah, Mr. Bringle, can you tell me more about the line that runs through the bottom of that building? Is that stormwater?
It's a storm drain. It's an
Okay.
existing storm drain line. That's correct.
Okay. Do you know the details of that storm drain and what happens if a repair needs to be made to it and there's now a building sitting on top of that?
Well, there's a building sitting on top of it now.
That's true.
Okay.
But it could be, at this point,
Right.
it could be remedied.
The only details I know is the elevation at the beginning and the elevation at the end.
Okay.
And we got its location on the combination of locating those field objects as well as information that I was able to get from the town, from you guys.
Help
That's
us out.
something
How
our
deep is it?
engineer will look at.
How deep is the storm drain?
Looking to see if I don't have an invert elevation on there, do I? Looks like I don't have an invert elevation on here for you. The inlet itself, if I'm remembering correctly, is around 4 feet deep, maybe 3.5, 4. That's from memory, because
So possibly then your footers you could disturb that when you do your footers, right?
it might be, there might be a surprise there.
You said our engineers have not looked at this yet.
They have not, no. They would review the next stage in the plan. They usually don't step in until after the concept is approved.
Right.
Okay, so what we're here for this evening is for approval for a concept plan. Do I hear a motion or anything in that order?
I think for concept, I move that we approve as presented.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Questions? Any comment from the floor? Jim, you have any other comments or anything?
No, just this gets the ball rolling, and that's when the various county agencies will do their review, and our engineer will do the review as well. Now, there will be some additional detail provided as we get, as we move forward. So right now, there's not enough detail for some of those agencies to look at, but that'll be our next step, the preliminary step.
Right. Okay.
And then when we go into the next step for preliminary, we would like to see some rendering, some coloring drawings of this.
Certainly.
So the motion was made for approval of the concept plan. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Okay. Those opposed likewise? Okay, you got that, Jim? Motion passed. Thank you. That wasn't so bad, was it?
I'm sorry?
That wasn't so bad, was it?
Did you get my miss abstain?
Yes, I did. Jim got it on record. And thank you for that. Next item on the agenda is review and comment for a pending PCA case 2018-207, Taneytown Crossing Special Exception. Jim, would you brief us on that?
Sure. This is the same project we saw a few months ago. It's back before you in a slightly revised format, which currently is not seeking any variances, which the original application was. So the developer has come back in, talked with staff, the city attorney again, and ready to take another crack at it. And Clark Schaefer is here to represent the applicant, and I'll turn it over to him.
Okay. Mr. Jay, would you like to make a few comments?
Yeah. Before we get into the presentation, it's a relatively new thing that we are allowing the applicants to come and make a presentation to you. And I want to make sure that we frame this right, is that obviously you're going to be looking at pictures, you're going to be looking at diagrams, obviously to put some color on things for you. But this is more about your recommendation to the Board of Zoning Appeals. So what the Board of Zoning Appeals is going to deal with is a special exception or a conditional use. And I wanted to kind of highlight the standards that they use to review this so that you know what they're going to be thinking about on this. And remembering that when this project gets developed, it's going to come back to you for all the things that you normally deal with. So you'll have another opportunity for that. So when the Board of Zoning Appeals grants a special exception, it's deemed to grant a specific use that would not be appropriate generally or without restriction, and shall be based on a finding that certain conditions governing the special exceptions as outlined in the code exist. So that's what they're looking for, saying you couldn't do this use everywhere unless you find these special criteria have been met. The criteria are in 205-76 of the zoning code, and it basically says they have to have satisfactory proof that arrangements about these items, but not limited to these items, have been made. One is ingress and egress to the property and the structures thereon, which dealing with automotive, pedestrian safety, convenience, traffic flow, control, access in case of fire or catastrophe. So access. The second is off-street parking and loading areas where required, with specific attention to the economic noise, glare, and odor effects that the special exception may have on neighboring properties. The third would be refuse and service areas, things like dumpsters, trash, things like that. The fourth are utilities. So utilities could be everything from the water and sewer to the electric, dealing with their location, availability, and compatibility with the neighboring properties. The next one is screening and buffering with reference to type, dimension, and character. Screening and buffering, the typical could be landscaping, fencing. In certain situations you'll see here, it could be houses, screening and buffering other types of uses from the properties there. Signs, if any are proposed, or any exterior lighting, dealing with signs, any yard requirements or open space, and the big one is the general compatibility with adjacent properties and other properties in the district. So those are the criteria that they need to meet in order to find that this use is appropriate. Because there is a garden apartment proposed for this, there's a special condition in the code dealing with garden apartments, and that's 20585. And it basically says that the Board of Appeals may grant a special exception for garden apartments in the R7500 district in accordance with the provisions of the chapter, which we just talked about, provided there has been satisfactory conformance with all the provisions of the chapter related to the special exception. And it goes on to talk about this is going to allow the amounts that they can have. It'd be a complex with not less than 6 or not more than 24 dwelling units maintained for both short and long-range planning goals of the city. That deals with the comprehensive planning goals that the city has, and providing for the health, safety, and general welfare of the community. So those are basically the criteria. You can look that up. They talk about parking and things like that with right to that. So those are the standards that your colleagues on the Board of Appeals will review this for. And what you're trying to do is take your expertise based on what they're going to present and work out whether they need to consider anything that they would not normally consider, or whether you're okay with the idea. We're talking about the use and things related to the use. So it's not necessarily the look, dimensions, those types of things. But certainly you can ask those questions because they'll be here to answer them. Any questions about that?
Good. All right.
Good. Mr. Schaefer?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, thank you for having us today. I'm the attorney that's representing the developer. I'd just like to take a minute to sort of make an introductory statement, and then I'll try to anticipate your questions. I understand that you're not shy, and if you have questions, and we welcome them, just I'm sure we'll hear them. I think Jay did a great job of summarizing the legal background. I'd just like to emphasize that this exercise is a land use exercise. Of course, that's not a surprise to you because that's what you do for a living. You look at particular pieces of land in your community, and then you look at proposed developments, and you try to decide or evaluate whether the proposed development is appropriate. Now we have the specific things that we get down to, like traffic, access, utilities, but overall, the goal of zoning and planning and land use is to allow the productive, economically fruitful use of and proper use of property in your jurisdiction for the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens. Here we have a piece of property that's undeveloped, that's located at a key intersection on the west or the north side of town, however you look at it. I know you're familiar with the property. It's a small town. I know you're familiar with the property. We have property owners who desire that their property be allowed to be used for productive purpose. And the good news for the property owners is that your ordinance specifically provides for this type of use. Now, it does, as Jay pointed out, make it a special exception. But the way what that means is that the city of Taneytown, in the form of its mayor and council, has already enacted an ordinance, the zoning ordinance, which has said that this use is a special exception in the R7500 zone. And under Maryland law, and the mayor and council knew this when they listed this as a special exception, that means that it's presumptively compatible under Maryland law. But it needs a special look. It's listed in there, but it needs a special look. And I think when you hear and consider the evidence here and consider where this is and what the proposal is, you'll see that this use fits at this place. It does not have adverse effects that are above and beyond those adverse effects normally associated with such a use, regardless of its location in the zone. That's the verbiage from the special exception case law. In other words, you don't just say no to a use because it's going to generate another couple traffic trips into an intersection. Because if you use that criteria, no use would be allowed of vacant land. Every use of vacant land is going to generate some traffic and some other stuff. So with that being said, I'd like to ask Marty Hackett to just generally and quickly just describe the proposed design and development of this project. Marty, you want me to hold that up for you?
Hackett with CLSI. We're the engineer and land planner on the project. As Mr. Weaver said earlier, the difference is the plan here that we have before you tonight, we basically establish any of the buildings and locations where we would not be asking or requesting any variances. What we did try to do is some of the buildings we actually some of the other neighboring properties, so all the way through, if you notice. Key points is we have access, significant access off of Westview Drive, which accesses both pieces of property, both land bay areas, if you will.
Now, Marty, from a land use perspective, is that a decent access?
Yes, it is.
Site distance, et cetera?
Yes, it is. The other thing is some of the stuff. We provide access. This thing will have pedestrian-friendly access. We have sidewalks shown throughout. We also have sidewalks that actually tie in to the existing sidewalks along Baltimore Street. The screening stuff that we were talking about earlier, we're looking at screening that's screened from as many buffers from the existing houses that are around there today, but also the buildings that we're proposing are actually screened from the off-street parking lot. So you're looking very similar to Main Street as it is as you're going into town. You don't really see any parking. It's all off-street, except for obviously the parallel street that's allowed parking on the road. But these parking lots are going to be screened by the buildings. We have proposed a community building, tot lot area, dog walking area, that kind of thing, like a dog park.
That's good. He'll be available for questions, obviously, but I'd like to get Jeff Paxson up here. Jeff, tell the...
Jeff Paxson with Pax Edwards.
Yeah, and you're part of the development team, right?
Yeah, I'm a developer. I'm part of the development team and one of the owners in the project.
Okay, so Jeff, tell the planning commission what this project is, what the bones of this project are.
Okay, so and we spoke about this last time. What we have is it's a 36 dwelling unit development comprised of duplexes and a garden-style apartment building. What we've done is we've assembled this property and we've applied to the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development for financing. And the type of financing that we use to develop our communities is through a tax credit that we get through the state. It's a federal tax credit. And what we do is we use that tax credit, in a nutshell, to develop very, very high quality housing, as good or better than market rate housing, for the areas we serve, and at the same time keep the rents affordable to the residents we're trying to serve.
So Jeff, in this project, a certain number of these units will be income eligible units, correct?
Yeah, they'll actually be income restricted units to families earning less than 60% of area median income.
Okay, families, so household income less than 60% of median will be some of the certain percentage of the units will be eligible for
Correct.
those. The other units will be market rate.
Right, we have a handful of units that are market rate, but the bulk of our units are gonna range from about $25,000 a year up to about $55,000 a year. Those are the income limits that we have to live within and rent within in order to qualify for the tax credit that we're using. So
So if somebody came in and said, I want to, there'll be a 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units, right?
we have 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units.
So say somebody comes in and says, I want to rent a 2-bedroom unit, and I want to rent an income eligible unit.
Okay.
How's that process work?
So, there's an application process. In order to get into the community, you have to go through a background check, both credit and criminal, and then you have to go through an income verification. And we have to verify that the income of the family or young professional or senior falls within that income range.
And you've looked at the statistics for the Taneytown area in terms of median household income, correct?
Yes, we have.
And what's that tell, what's the?
It tells me that the people that are going to move into, mind you, we're only talking about 36 houses. The people that are going to move into these 36 houses already live in Taneytown, and they already work in Taneytown.
What's the household income? If I make $80,000 a year, am I going to be able to rent one of these?
You could rent one of these. You could rent one of the non-restricted units.
Okay, well, how about, let's talk about the restricted. What's that, about $60,000 a year?
If you make $50,000 a year, you would likely fall right into the income range
And that's
to
a
rent.
household, that's a household income, right?
Correct.
So a young teacher, a young firefighter, or whatever.
Yes.
Now, if that person is eligible, what's the benefit, what do they get for that?
What does that person get?
Yeah, what do they get?
Well, they get to,
They get a 2-bedroom unit
they
for
get
about how much a month?
for roughly $900 to $1,000 a month, but depending upon what unit they rent.
Okay, so, and that's below market?
Relatively, yes.
Yeah, because these units are gonna be brand new, describe the construction type.
So, I mean, what we're talking about is, and I don't have it would be helpful if the architecturals were up to see the quality of the units. But what we're talking about are brand new, state-of-the-art.
Michael, why don't you, I'm gonna introduce Michael Blake. He's the architect. And if you don't mind, we'll double team you here. I'll let him be part of the deal. But Jeff, which one did you want to see?
So,
Now remember, you got the microphone back here, so you
Yeah, nice.
kind of need to.
see which one we're pointing out here. Let's talk about these right here. They're too small for you guys to see.
Yeah, but you need to go to the mic, sir.
I'm sorry. I think that's a little better.
Yes.
That'll give you a sense for the ones that we're talking about. So, so the units that the units that he's holding up are 3-bedroom duplex units, and what those are, they're 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-story units. They've got they benefit from a very green design, so we have high energy efficient HVAC systems, a full Energy Star appliance package, so we have Energy Star dishwashers, Energy Star refrigerators, Energy Star washers and dryers, and so these are, a fully equipped appliance package that the residents will benefit from.
Jeff, are these are gonna be built by your and Jessica's company, right?
These are going to be built by a contractor that we actually hire as a third party, but a professional contractor. These are professionally managed by.
Are you gonna own them after they're built?
We're going to own them after they're built.
Manage them after they're built?
They're going to be professionally managed after they're built.
What do you mean by professionally managed?
We have a third party management company that will come in. It's actually Humphrey Management Company out of Columbia, and they manage, I don't know, several thousand apartments and townhomes in Maryland.
What's it mean to manage an apartment complex?
It means that they're the third-party manager. It means that they're in charge of the oversight of the community. They collect the rent. They make sure that the property is maintained. They make sure all the people that live in there are qualified to live there.
Are they physically present on site?
They are physically present on site. So we'll have.
Explain that. What does that mean?
So what that means is this property will be staffed by 2 people. Actually, it could be 2.5. Usually in a community like this, we'll have a full-time manager or part-time manager, a full or a part-time repair and maintenance person, and usually just a general kind of porter type person that does, odds and ends.
So where will those people exist on the site?
So in our community building, we have our offices are in the community building. And so there'll be an office in there for the manager. There'll be an area for the maintenance guy to have his equipment and do his maintenance stuff.
So if a shingle falls off a roof, somebody makes a phone call, right?
It gets taken care of right away.
And
So
there's somebody on site that does that?
yes,
Okay. Are there, the program that you operate under, which is under the auspices of the state of Maryland, correct?
yes,
All right, and you apply for these kind of tax credits, right?
yes,
And you go through a rigorous system, competitive system, to get approved, correct?
yes. It's a competitive system, and they don't just give these tax credits out to anybody. They give it to folks who have a successful track record of the design, development, construction, and management of these developments over a long period of time. So you actually can't even apply for, you can apply, but you can't even be awarded the tax credits unless you've got over 5 years' experience.
Does the state of Maryland follow up to make sure you're doing what you said you were gonna do?
Yes, the state of Maryland has annual inspections and annual audits at the properties, and if you've failed on maintenance or income requirements, or you're not keeping a good property, or if there's a lot of complaints about a property, the state strongly takes that into consideration the next time you go to apply for financing.
Okay, so most people know what a tax credit is, but explain how a tax credit would work here.
So in this case, what we do is we're awarded an allocation of tax credits. We don't use the tax credits ourselves. We in turn partner with an investor who's typically a big bank. Most of the projects I've worked on and own we're partnered with big banks. Wells Fargo, SunTrust, Bank of America, Capital One. Those are kind of our typical buyers of the tax credits. They use the tax credits, so they in fact really buy a partnership interest in the project with us for the tax credits as their return. And so
Because they can use the tax credits to save themselves a lot of tax payments, correct?
correct,
Because they make a lot of money, don't most of them?
Most of them
They
do.
make a lot of money, don't they?
But in return, what we get is those tax credits that they buy, they give us equity. And we use that equity to build these beautiful communities that we have on the boards here. And all the communities that I've developed using tax credits have come out to be gorgeous, well-maintained, very successful communities.
So it allows you to put more capital into the actual construction and yet keep those rents lower than they would be otherwise marketed.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Can I interrupt here just for a second? So I rent one of your properties and my monthly rent's $1,000. Do I actually have to pay you $1,000?
You actually have to pay me $1,000.
Okay,
So if you're a tenant in that community, you have to write a check for $1,000 every month.
so nobody's getting subsidized from anywhere?
No, so we have no rental subsidy to offer to the residents. So the residents, in order to live here, you have to have the income to qualify to live here. So,
Okay.
Now, you said if a shingle comes off, someone takes care of that shingle right away. The homeowner does not maintain his house?
no, that would be great if they did, but in this case, we hire a professional management company. We have budgeted operating costs to take care of repairs and maintenance at the property.
Well, the key thing there is it's not a homeowner in the house.
Yeah, it's a renter.
They're all rentals.
Correct.
Now, Jeff, the renters, they would do light bulbs and,
Yeah, I mean-
But if an electric socket stops functioning, they call
They call the maintenance, and we don't want them going and trying to fix their own electric socket in our building. We want to take care of that stuff. We have a professional maintenance guy who all he does all day long is fix that kind of stuff. We don't want, we just don't want the renters
And you're
doing that.
telling this planning commission and the world that there'll be 2 or 2.5 people that will be staffed at this place?
Yes.
And they'll be on site, whether they 9 to 5?
Typically, yeah. I mean, we haven't set the exact hours, but yeah, typically they're on site 8:30, 9 to 5, 5:30. And there'll be 1 or 2 people on site on a daily basis. So, during
They're
the week.
responsible for all maintenance, the roads, the streets, the snow removal, all that?
Everything internal that's
So
not,
it's all your
it's all
corporation?
private. Although I don't remember if the roads inside, those are private? So, yeah, so we're responsible for all snow removal, inside of our community, so everything, which, I don't know where the site plan is.
Is Westview Drive a private road?
No.
So that would be public.
That's a
Why don't
city.
you just flip it, if you
That's
flip it
that's a
over.
city.
That would be public.
So, can you see it on the other side?
But all the internals, you see it here.
Yeah,
Everything gray would be private.
Everything internal is,
yeah, so any, like, snow removal inside, that's us, so.
Who does lawn care? Is that your maintenance
us.
as well? Very
So
good.
that's part of our budget, so.
can you identify on here which ones are the 3 bedrooms and which ones are the single and twos? What you were showing up there, is that, where on the drawings? Because he also shows buildings B and building A, and so which ones are, show us what they.
we've designated it that specifically on this plan.
Here's what I think I know. Can I walk up and?
Sure.
You guys can hear me. Is, Jessica, you tell me if I get this wrong, all right? So, these duplexes,
Speak up, Jeff.
these duplexes are 3-bedroom units around here.
So the building B, you suspect?
Do you know?
I believe
What's the
building
difference
B
between
is
building
what's,
B and A?
it's what's noted on the site.
Nobody
plan.
really knows.
Well, there's a lot of building Bs, so we,
Building Bs are all 3 bedrooms, so there'd be 2 units in each one, so it's a total of 26
Okay.
3-bedroom units.
Okay.
The garden apartment building is 10 units. 6 of those are 2 bedrooms, and 4 of those are 1 bedrooms.
And that's,
And then building C is,
The community building?
Accessible.
Oh, the accessible.
Yeah, it's got handicap accessible.
she said the garden apartments were 6 of the 2-bedroom and 4 of the 1-bedroom?
That's right.
Okay.
and building C was again,
That's just an accessible 3-bedroom, correct?
there's 3 bedrooms.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
That's sort of a presentation. We're available for any questions or we can add anything you want. We're looking forward to going to the Board of Zoning Appeals. We understand that even if we would get special exception from the Board of Zoning Appeals, we still need to do a detailed site plan. At the time, we have to show, as Jim pointed out in the previous crematory case, that's when the details will be back here after being reviewed by your engineers and your staff. We do have some architecturals. We have thought, I do want to say this, we did think about the architecture because we knew that this was a key piece of ground, in the town. It's at a pretty major intersection. And by the by, we're not, it wouldn't be unexpected nor unwelcome for the town if during the site plan review to request some kind of set-aside area for a welcome sign to the town. But that's if you wanted it. It's, we've got room. We've got room for a welcome sign. Michael Blake, why don't you talk a little bit about the architecture?
Before you jump one more, the 4 units on the curve coming into Harney Road, are they single-story or 2-story?
2-story.
There's 2 stories.
So you couldn't do anything after the last meeting we had, huh?
They're all 2 stories.
Well, because the rest of these houses here are all single-story.
Oh, right.
They're all 2 story.
No, they are single-story. Dale Klein, all those houses there are single-story brick.
His is. Dale don't live there anymore.
No, but he still owns it. All right, go ahead, sir.
Well, I'll be very brief. So we've got 4 boards there in addition to the site plan. The 2 boards on the easel there, any project that we start on, we sort of look at the community and the context And so we've done some reconnaissance and taken some photographs of relevant buildings in the area. And then on the bottom of those top two boards are sort of our response to that. So sort of the design in keeping with the character and characteristics of those buildings that we've seen in the community. And sort of the square, four-square form, the hipped roofs, the dormers, the front porches, all of those things that will help tie our community to the existing community. So that's an important part of any design that we get involved in. On the lower left there, that's a representative of some of the communities that this team has developed over the years, just to show you the quality of the materials and how we can translate the design into actual built residential communities. So we just wanted to share with you that we have done this in the past, and this group has built and operated dozens of communities of this scale. And then the board in the lower right is just more views of the community and how it's going to look. These are early days for the design. We're still sort of developing, and it'll be an iterative process with folks like you providing feedback. We'll be getting feedback from others, and I think we'll even have to go through a design review process to get even more detailed feedback. So we're certainly open to that, but these are sort of our first approach to this community.
So the project will look something like the one you have in Hagerstown then, right? The one at Pepper Bush Circle?
It actually, from a quality standpoint, it will, but the one on Pepper Bush Circle, they're actually new garden apartments. And so one of the garden buildings, that 10-unit building, will look similar to that.
Okay.
But the other units they're duplex units. They're really just two-story townhomes. And so they will look similar from a quality perspective, but they're not the same type of construction. So, are there any other questions?
Anyone have
Standing
any
here.
questions?
Yeah, I do want to, I do want to address the parking.
Okay.
I see that you're proposing less parking spaces than what would typically be required. Are you anticipating parking along Westview Drive? Okay. Could that be a signed no parking area? I feel Westview is an extremely narrow street, and we already have enough parking on there.
I don't have a problem with that.
So that's my recommendation for zoning appeals, when they talk about parking on this, that they do restrict parking on Westview. Yellow curb signs, whatever they need to do.
Tell you that right now.
Have you developed other projects like
I
this?
got a substantial.
Yes, we actually, my company in the last 7 years has developed over 20 of these communities.
Need parking.
And do you have experience with the parking needs for these kind of things?
I have significant experience with the parking needs of these developments, yes.
And do you believe that the parking you provided here is more than
I
adequate?
believe it's more than adequate, yes, so.
Even for people that are having a poker party or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, our experience is that, all the residents come with at least one car. Typically, it's rare to have more than one, but they're like everybody else, we all have friends over, and, you need more than one, but you don't necessarily need two per unit. So we think that this is adequate for what we need in this development, so.
Never mind, but you've already said you're not counting street parking.
Correct.
To accommodate your residents.
Correct.
Brings to my concern with a three-bedroom home with only having 2 parking spots.
I mean, it's been our experience that two spaces for a 3-bedroom home has been plenty for our developments, so. But I understand the
Husband
concern.
and wife, and then Thanksgiving, where do I park?
Well, how many, you referred to a handful of homes will be not income restricted. Do you have more finite numbers of how many of these will be income restricted? How many?
Yeah, right now it looks like 32 will be income restricted and 4 will not be income restricted.
Okay, those that are not income restricted, are they set here, or is it just a blanket
No, so the 4 that are not income restricted are going to be 1-bedroom units in the Garden apartment building.
So the apartments are not income restricted.
Four of
those
the
are not.
apartments are not income restricted. The others are.
But, okay.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments or questions? Anyone from the floor would like to make any comments?
Chris Tillman, George's on York. I was listening to the presentation, and of course what strikes me is they're using tax credits for lower income residents in order to make the property work. They say they're getting, they get cash rents, but they're not being subsidized, but it doesn't mean that the low income residents aren't being subsidized. So essentially you're taking my tax dollars to line your pocket and lower my property values. And as a libertarian, I'm devoutly opposed to that. My second issue is as a business owner here in town, a new business owner, and we are trying to substantially up the look and feel of downtown. I personally just invested almost $750,000 of my own money in a business, in an upscale business, because we saw a community on the rise, and frankly, I'm opposed to anything that would bring that down. Thank you.
Anyone else? I guess, how does this fit into our comprehensive plans as being a designated rental area?
As far as the comp plan goes, the area is simply designated as for a residential use. Whether that be rental, owner occupied, the comp plan doesn't really speak to that level of detail when it comes to the land use map. So the comp plan does talk about providing clean, affordable housing for all income levels and things of that nature. They're kind of broad statements, but certainly this project fits in with that, the intent of the comp plan in terms of the housing element. So I do believe we've seen predominantly single-family homes constructed over the last probably generation, and just now with Meats Crossing, we're starting to see a little more variety with the ability of with Community Village and the townhomes being allowed there. So again, I think in terms of the comp plan, this certainly fits.
Okay.
Jim, does this qualify as a development? I mean, it's a number of homes in one area being by one.
We would be looking at a site plan. Typically, when you think of a residential development, you're thinking of a subdivision, a major subdivision, like Meadowbrook or Meads Crossing, or any of the more recent ones like White Birch Estates or Creekside out there behind Food Lion. Those sort of projects.
Right.
So this would be more akin to, not exactly like Carol Vista, because that's a condominium structure, but similar in that Carol Vista was also a site plan rather than a subdivision plan. So, similar in that regard, it is a residential community that's going to be governed by a site plan and go through that process.
Just kind of go slightly off topic, what in terms of impact fees or things would be involved in this?
All the usual per dwelling, water, sewer, benefit assessments, connection fees, police impact fee, park impact fee.
Okay, so all of those things
Yeah,
are...
all the usual ones for each dwelling unit would be charged.
Okay, the only reason I ask is in the past, we've done the whole in lieu of thing, and I see they have, the tot lot, the dog park. I want to make sure that we weren't forfeiting such thing this early in the process.
I haven't calculated the, the area designated for that, but I don't think the intent is to deed those over to the city as park lands.
Okay.
So I don't think we'd be looking at a fee in lieu of open space, or at the open space rather than the fee.
For the record, we're not asking for any exemptions.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? The Board of Appeal meeting is what, January the 22nd, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Second.
January?
January, not December, January. So our task tonight is to
Do something or do nothing?
do something or do nothing, or wait till our January, no, it can't be January,
Well, it would be early
be
January.
our first meeting that we have after the first year. So that would give you time to think about it a little bit more, or if you're ready to make a decision tonight, I'll entertain something.
Personally, I think based on what they've shown, it's a little easier to digest than what was previously brought to us. I mentioned my concerns about parking, especially restricting parking on Westview. I believe you have more experience with this type of thing as to how much parking is appropriate, but I'll leave that up to BZA to kind of determine that. But I'll make a motion that we give favorable recommendation with the caveat that we do ask that parking be restricted on Westview Drive as part of this process.
I'll second that.
Okay? Open for discussion? Okay,
Well, one second, sir. So, Jim, Westview is not restricted now for parking, I don't think,
Correct.
Correct.
okay? And, you know, the one thing that I would have concern about with, I don't like the idea of restricting the parking when you all come on board, if it's not already, because the people that already live there have those.
Well, no, it's restricting parking in front of those units. It's not Westview altogether.
Okay, I got you.
Mainly because right now they already park on the other side of the road there, which is acceptable. But
Right.
when you put anyone on the opposite,
You gotta- yeah,
you can't do two cars. I mean, right now we already have the people at the top of the hill parking on the street, and it gets a little hairy sometimes coming up there.
I agree.
So it's not Westview altogether.
Okay.
It's just simply the portion in front of the 4 units alongside Westview. Yeah, better clarification, yes.
I got you. Good.
anything else from the floor? Okay, there's a motion made and second to give a favorable recommendation. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Opposed?
Okay, Jim, did you get that?
Okay.
Sustain.
This is abstain, I said.
Abstain, okay.
Okay. Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
So do I. I just don't want another designation like we had with Connell's Trailer Park and all those others years ago.
Tell you that ahead of time.
Thank you. Thank you. Yep.
There's a lot of propaganda that just went on in this movie. There's no way that there's a person on site 24/7 to fix stuff.
No.
Or anything else. No, he didn't. He said there's always someone there.
Well,
Jay
They did
Packer?
a much better job this time than they did the other time.
He said it both ways.
Yeah.
but, you know,
But the parking's gonna kill you. Parking's gonna kill you.
Sure, I agree.
It's gonna be a,
Sooner or later, the family's gonna have an adult that's gonna need a car.
Anybody wanna ride out there? look at
And
a
there's
couple of these
places you
buildings?
could put parking, yeah.
Pardon me?
Does anybody wanna ride out and look at a couple of these buildings?
I pulled it up on the, Google.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind going out. I figured we have a month to do it, so. Jim, you ready to move forward then? Okay, ordinance none. We're up to your report.
Okay. The only other thing that I had really included in my report was a little blurb about the update to the zoning map. The one that's clipped up on the easel over there is our latest and greatest draft. This one includes the properties that have been annexed on Stumptown Road on either side of Water Run, not Water Run. Gosh, now I'm drawing a blank on the road. Break Iron.
Break iron.
Wait, no, Break Iron.
Amicus?
Amicus, yeah, Amicus, thank you. So we had never updated the map after annexing those properties that had the failed septic systems. And this map also includes the recently annexed Bollinger Park area, the Bollinger parcel, the Garrett parcel, and the two other Fringer Road properties that we bought several years ago. So that's the large green area up to the north. The draft map also corrects the 2010 map error where we failed to include the properties between Mill Avenue and the railroad tracks in the downtown business district. So they were on the comprehensive plan map to be zoned as downtown business, and we simply missed them. So there are 5 properties in there, and the reason this is timely is because it does tie in with the Monocacy crematory project, because while that use isn't specifically listed in either restricted industrial or downtown business, use of the funeral parlor is permitted in the downtown business district, and I think the crematory is more an accessory type use and more in keeping with that zoning designation to be in the same zone as the funeral parlor. The restricted industrial uses are more assembly, manufacture, distribution, that kind of thing, and the crematory really doesn't fit that well there either. So of the two, I think the downtown business is the better fit for it. And we had the need to correct the map anyhow, so we're trying to catch all of those things at once with the new map. So there will be an ordinance introduced at the December Mayor and Council meeting, public hearing in January, and then hopefully the ordinance will trigger the new adoption of the new map. So hopefully January we'll get that taken care of. So if there are any questions about the draft, and I did include a smaller copy in your packets. I don't know if it was large enough for you to make out much detail, but I tried to circle the areas that were where things had changed from the current zoning map. So that is about it for me. We did issue zoning certificates for the first stick of townhomes at Meads Crossing. So the first new townhomes in over 20 years, I guess. We're going to be under construction soon. So, and I guess one last quick thing on Meads Crossing is that Bob Ward New Homes may be seeking some variances for some of the townhouse lots. They want the ability to be able to put up a 10-foot deep deck, to be able to offer a 10-foot deep deck on any of the townhomes. And within each stick of townhomes, as you may recall, there's a setback from unit to unit. So by the time you get to the unit that is farthest from the street, it has a significantly smaller rear yard than the unit on the opposite end of the townhouse stick. So MRA, the developer's engineer, and Bob Ward are kind of going through the exercise right now of determining which lots they want to seek variances for to be able to offer a deck on the townhomes. So the first stick, for example, had rear yards that ranged from 40 feet to 25 feet, and the agreed upon rear yard setback for Meads was 20 feet in their development rights and responsibilities agreement. So for that end unit that only has 25 feet, that would limit them to a 5-foot wide deck. And Bob Ward Homes would like to be able to offer 10-foot decks on any of the townhomes. So that may be another pending BZA case coming before you in the next couple months. But other than that, that's about it for this month for me.
What Head Crossing ought to do is wait so they can have a whole list when they come back, because there's gonna be.
That's the intent, is for them to
They
do
cheated on a lot of stuff, so.
a group variance for a bunch of lots at once. And I think we've seen that with some other subdivisions. I was not zoning administrator at the time, but just having reviewed the Board of Appeals folders, we've seen variance requests from developers while the new homes were being built in communities where they had some rear yards or unusual lot configurations that once they sited the house on it, they realized that they couldn't build a deck or put a garage or something like that. So we have seen
Or park 2 cars.
similar cases where, the developer has come back in after the plan's been approved to seek variances for certain lots within the project. So not really new ground on that one.
Now, when it comes to the backyards, if they want to do that, now Community Village are not allowed to have sheds, is that correct?
Right.
Okay, you want to move on to the construction phase projects too?
Let's see. Well, one interesting note, I just received a call today from Richard Kress of Carol Vista fame, and he advised that they have sold their last unit at Carol Vista. The last couple units were built on speculation. So while we issued permits some time ago, they finally sold the final unit. So they are going to begin the closeout process. And so we'll have Public Works go out there and televise the sewer lines and all that good stuff. And reduce their surety to the maintenance level and things like that. So that's kind of a milestone for us. That was a very big project for the city, and I think a very positive one. So finally coming to a close. Nothing really new on any of the other projects but Meads. Meadowbrook is chugging away. They've had been a little slow the last couple months, but they have pulled another single-family home out there, so they're moving along. Section 5 in Meadowbrook is under construction. I don't know if anybody's been out there to see the work done. The roads are kind of cut in already, and that's proceeding, but the weather has been really hampering both them and Meads Crossing. It's just been so wet that they've been really kind of slowed down a lot.
Has Meadowbrook figured out how they're going to fix their drainage issues up there, or their runoff issues, or is that actually resolved now?
We think it's been resolved. They were able to open up some inlets a little bit earlier than scheduled so that we didn't have all of that water coming down to an inlet in the older section of the community. So that seems to have helped the situation. We haven't had the flooding in recent rains that we did earlier in the summer.
Bob Ward has made it right with the old area?
I believe so, yes. They worked with the homeowners to reimburse them for some, lost mulch and things of that nature. So, they were very good to work with the homeowners there, so.
Great.
If anybody has any questions, I'll do my best to field them, otherwise, that's it.
Tannery, barn, anything going on down there?
Nothing
they'll
since
tell
since last month. Nothing new. They have yet to pull any permits to convert to commercial use.
Are they done doing grading out front? Is that all they're gonna take off that hill?
I'll have to check the grading permit and see if that's Actually, I don't think they disturbed enough to get a grading permit. I'll follow up with them and email everybody. I don't know the answer to that one.
Doing a lot of grading out back.
You're not supposed to see that. I guess, Jay, nothing for,
To comment after the ordinance is introduced.
Right. So, timing issues comes back to, are you going to meet in early January? That would be one of the questions, because we're going to need your comment on this map, saying you reviewed it and approved it. However, it's not introduced officially yet. That's next week. And since you don't meet in the end of December, if you're going to meet in the beginning of January, then you can comment on it then. If you're not, and that's the only reason you would be meeting in the early part of January is to do that, then I think you can do it tonight based on the fact that this is not going to change.
okay.
So you can decide what your plan is for January, but you can't wait till the end of January is what I'm saying.
Well, I guess we'll do the same as we did in the previous years. Our regular meeting is the 28th of January, and if Jim has an agenda that he can put together for January the 7th, would that work if we needed one? Would that suit everyone if we needed to have a meeting in January?
Yeah, the 7th would be fine.
What night's that?
It's a Monday.
Monday night,
Is it Monday?
okay? So, let's go back to the map. I know I have it.
I had it,
Two.
and I lost it.
Okay, we got it right here, so.
It was here.
So I guess there isn't any more to discuss, because Jim, you already filled us in, so I guess all we need is a motion or recommendation or for approval.
Yes.
Make a motion to approve the map.
Second.
Okay, and can you put identification to that map? What are we
Draft
calling it?
zoning map.
What are we calling this map?
It's going to be the zoning map with the city. So we're
The
calling it
2018 draft zoning map?
2019, aren't we calling it the 2019 zoning map?
Okay.
So I already made that motion. Who seconded it?
I did.
Okay. Darrell seconded. Any discussion?
Just a quick question. I see there's, for our 20,000, obviously there's the Baptist church, and there's that little itty bitty triangle right in the middle of the map. What is that and why is it 20,000?
That is property
There's one. Wait a minute.
off of George Street near the Dunbar building that used to be part of the rubber factory.
Right.
Okay.
It's a sliver that's behind, it's owned by by a property that fronts George Street, more or less across from Darby Drive.
Okay.
It came into the city with the Crane Masters annexation. The homeowner on George Street had acquired that wedge-shaped property from the previous owners before Crane Masters acquired the property. When it came into the city, there was concern about it potentially being used for 2 dwellings because it is large enough. I think it's over 20,000 square feet. And I think the Planning Commission had concerns about there being multiple flag lots back there. And by making it R20,000, it made it more likely that there would only be one dwelling squeezed back there.
You couldn't subdivide.
Is that the Stanball? Is that Stanball's? Stanball's? Okay, I remember that.
So that's why the yellow instead of orange,
So it's kind of a creative way to restrict development on it. Okay.
pretty much. I think the shape of the lot pretty well would restrict things to one dwelling, but I suppose somebody could pursue all kinds of variances to try to get 2 sites out of it, square footage wise. I don't know that it's likely, but that's why it was yellow. That's why it came in as R20.
The other question I had was, At what point do we remove the never did exist, never will exist road that would extend Maryland Avenue out to York Street?
I'll work with the county on that.
Okay. I mean, I'm not even going to get into the paper alley there, but at least we know that that will never, ever exist.
Right.
Okay.
Claire, you have any comments about the map?
No, I'll get with Jim and
Okay.
we'll revise it if I need to. And I'll have a copy ready.
Okay.
I'll wait till after, I got another subject when you're.
Okay, well, the motion, did you have any other question?
That's all.
Okay, the motion was made and second. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, thank you.
Second item, Creekside, just to back up with Creekside, I've been telling you every month that we're gonna get ready to release the bond, but they had one more thing to do, and one more thing to do. They don't have anything else to do now. The sidewalk's done, the punch list is done, everything's done. So we're going to, at the next council meeting, talk about reducing the bond to the maintenance levels, and whatever that would be, get them to execute the deeds, which we approved a year ago probably, and then that development will end up in their maintenance phase. The only odd part that's the council's gonna need to consider is that we have usually a 3-year maintenance obligation, and the public works agreement, I mean, this is an old one, like, I don't know, 20 years old, where we bonded surveying and things like that. And, the new iteration of the public works agreement, we don't bond those and we don't hold maintenance on them. Because it doesn't really make sense. Why would we have a maintenance obligation on the surveying that's been done 20 years ago where the lots are sitting? So what we'll probably do is match up the maintenance requirements to what the new maintenance requirements are, and then go from there. So if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. And that's it.
Okay.
Can I ask Jay a question? Jay, is there gonna be some kind of an agreement that's made with this rental properties?
Which one?
The rental properties that we talked about tonight? Is there an agreement made that there is gonna be a manager on site? That they are gonna take care of the snow and grass?
Well, if the Board of Zoning Appeals grants it, one of the things that they need to consider is making that conditions of the use. And that, because I don't think any other agreement will work. They need to say, if you do this, these are the conditions that you testified you were going to do, and you have to do them. Meaning, if there's no on-site rental property, you can't do the use, and on-site maintenance. So that's what the Board of Zoning Appeals needs to do. Whether they'll do it is up to them.
Isn't there something in the county that if you got so many units, you have to do that anyway? Because they got me already because they wasn't thinking I was doing something.
I'm not sure, but it wouldn't
I
apply
think
here.
it's with the county.
That's the one issue that
They come up with some surprising things sometimes. I've always won
Right.
because I've always done it.
We're always worried in general about maintenance, because not necessarily of the grass and the things like that, because we would never maintain that, just like we wouldn't come to your house and cut it. But the snow, the roads, that's what their plan is, that they're going to be private, and they're going to be built to the private standards, not to the public standards. But years down the road, and we ran into that with the townhouses down here, somebody gets the idea, says, oh, well, the city should take it because we don't want to maintain it anymore. And that's up to the city to say, no, we're not going to do it at that time. There was talk about that in Carroll Vista. We pay city tax dollars. Why doesn't the city do this? And the idea is that's what you bought into. That was the deal. And you can't alter the deal because the roads weren't constructed that way. So you can't have it both ways. So to the best we can, if they grant that, then conditions should be set during that hearing saying these are the things that they should have.
Well, and they had mentioned last time that as part of whatever agreement they have with the state, that they have to maintain ownership of that for, what'd they say, 30 years?
30 years.
Right.
So in theory, there would at least be on-site maintenance and management for those 30 years.
And I verified the program, not their application and their stuff, but I did call to say, what's the story with this program? Because it sounds too good to be true, is that, there really isn't, they really do just get cash funneled because they're eligible from the state, from corporations that want to buy in to get tax credits. And it's not exactly like you'd think where they get all the cash up front. They get the cash over a period of time because the tax credits last for a period of time. And that's the need for this to last for a period of time, because if it doesn't.
They end up making very good money, this outfit,
Well, it's a business, I would expect that
How do
they
they
would.
handle bankruptcies?
with the rents and the tax breaks.
I don't know how.
Should that happen?
If they would go bankrupt.
I'm
it's-
sure they have to be bonded in some way, shape, or form.
I mean, I think that they have to set this up to the point where they would go bankrupt if nobody would rent their places. That would be the issue that they would have. But I don't want to quote the numbers exactly, but going back to their point is, if it's a $16 million project, I thought that's what they said, they'll bring like $14 million in equity from these tax credits, so they're really only printing $2 million of their own equity out. It'd be hard to mess that up, type of thing. Because now you're all talking about is fixed cost and maintenance cost, and that's it. So.
And the rents aren't any cheaper, not really.
$1,000 a month is pretty expensive.
That's what I'm
I think
told
so,
to.
yeah.
They didn't tell you the 3 bedrooms, they told you the 2 bedrooms.
Right. And, you know, I did verify that you cannot be, when people say we're on HUD, you know, Section 8, they cannot offer Section 8. So if you're eligible for Section 8, you're not going to get a Section 8 voucher to help pay your $1,000. That has to be your $1,000 contribution. So that limits the pool that they're pulling from.
Right.
And it also creates a risk on their part in the fact that there's no government money going to them. Like Section 8 housing gets the government check straight to them.
Right.
They got to collect it from the tenants. So they're going to be very careful about who they rent to.
Well, they're saying they're pulling from our own population right here. That's,
You just said that.
pardon me?
You just said that.
Yeah.
Well, and there's a very good chance, because people who are paying that much rent on the other side of town, most of them are gonna be able to get into this nicer house away from the other side of town.
And the other thing that, you know, without getting into the weeds that I did verify, is that it is income driven. So imagine handing me your tax return, okay? It's not what you own and have in the bank. You could have your house in Florida that's worth a couple $1 million, and your income is just your retirement and your Social Security, so you could meet those thresholds, and you could live in one of these places here where your family is, but still have plenty of assets somewhere else. That's probably milking the system, but I mean, that's what they're talking about. It's not an asset-driven.
Well, he said that. I mean, you can make $80,000 or $90,000 and still live in one of them.
And you know, they talk about starters, but I think in this area, there's no senior housing. I mean, Carol Vista is a big jump from 80 or 90,000. So, you know, where are you going to go to live as a senior if you wanted to be in the area part of the year, type of thing. So, I mean, what they said about the program checks out. They did get approval. I don't know if that ever came out here, that they did. Remember
I think
when
it
we
was
talked about it
assumed,
before?
yeah.
They did not know whether they had approval, but their application was approved by Department of Housing and Community Development. Hence, the financing is in place and for real.
Okay.
That's all I have.
I have no updates.
Okay. You had me nervous with that big roll.
What was that?
You had me nervous with that big roll.
That's why she speaks so softly, because she carries that big
Big
stick
stick,
with
yeah.
her.
Okay, anyone else have anything? George?
No.
I have nothing, sir.
Carol?
I do not, sir.
Holly? Jim? Okay, so we'll wait to hear from you, Jim, on the January meeting, or anything else in between.
So January 7th, if
January
something comes
7th,
in.
yep.
Yeah.
Otherwise, last Monday.
Nothing in
normal.
December, right?
Correct.
Nothing in December. All right, now I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So move.
Second?
All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Thank you, sir.